Welcome and good afternoon. Thank you all for joining our panel discussion on the latest BEAD updates and strategies, what service providers need to know. Here to speak are who I believe to be the most qualified individuals in the industry on this subject. We have Gabriel Moran, Government Affairs and Policy Manager from Tarana Wireless, Steve Schwerbel, Director of State Advocacy for WISPA, and last but not least, Alex Cernick, the Fiber and Program Manager for Winncom Technologies. If anyone has any additional questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to add them into the chat and they will be addressed at the end of the webinar. Alex, you're up.
Dawn, thank you so much for the introduction. Awesome as always. Just to kind of set the stage before we do this. So again, thank you for our visitors today. Gabriel with Tarana Wireless and Steve with WISPA. For today's panel discussion, as Dawn mentioned, if you've got questions about your individual state or programs or policies, enter them in the chat and we can address those at the end. To kind of set the stage, we want to talk about what's the latest with BEAD. What updates are we hearing from NTIA? And ultimately, what the service providers like yourselves need to know to be successful. So we wanted to start this panel discussion with going over what's the latest and greatest, what states are moving to pre-qualification, what states are moving through application. Gabriel, can you kind of walk us through that, what this looks like for the last half of the 50 states that are moving through BEAD qualification?
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex and Dawn, thank you so much for the opportunity to present out today. And I'm glad to be joined here with Steve Schwerbel from WISPA. I'm going to keep this very quick because we can certainly get bogged down in the weeds as to the nuances and intricacies of where states are at in the BEAD program. So we love all of our states equally, and so we're just going to run through this alphabetically. So Alabama has already finished its pre-qualification process, is currently solidifying its subgrantee application windows, currently looking at Q1 or Q2 of 2025 for those. Alaska is currently in the middle of its application window, so if you're an Alaska-based provider, you still have until April 14th to get those applications in. Arizona has already completed one round of applications and is currently scheduled to run round two starting on May 12th. So if you're in Arizona, certainly be aware of those dates. Arkansas has already completed round one as well and is already slated to start round two or tranche two of its applications starting on February 25th and ending on March 11th. California is currently in the middle of its pre-qualification process, so you still have time to get your application or your pre-qualification materials in order, and is currently slated to start its application window beginning on March 25th and closing on April 23rd. They will do one round. Colorado has already completed round one and is about to close round two on February 28th. So the window is pretty much as functionally passed to participate in Colorado. Connecticut has closed round one, will close round one as of today. So that will be the end, and they will publish additional information about any round two should that be necessary. Delaware is the first state here on this list that has already gotten across the finish line and had its final proposal approved by the NTIA and is currently in the process of signing contracts with providers and hopefully getting construction started here pretty soon. Moving on to Florida, they're currently still, they're not going to run a pre-qualification process, but looking to start up their application window in late March to early April for applications. Definitely want to stay in touch with the broadband office, sign up for their newsletter to get the latest and greatest as to what they're thinking for that timing. For Georgia, they have already completed round one of applications and currently looking to start round two from June 5th to July 3rd, so get ready for that. Hawaii has already completed round one and is currently in the middle of its best and final offer round that will end on March 14th. Idaho is about to start up its round one application starting on March 6th, which will run till March 27th, and currently already has dates for round two. Illinois will close its round one on February 26th, which is tomorrow, and is scheduled to start run round two from April 22nd to June 6th. Indiana has already closed one round of bidding, is currently assessing and scoring those applications, and will announce round two dates once they get a better sense of their coverage. Iowa is currently working on standing up its subgrantee application process and will announce those dates shortly. Kansas has already closed its applications and is in the process of scoring and negotiating with providers on their applications, so Kansas is done. Kentucky will keep its pre-qualification open until March 13th for providers that did not participate during the initial pre-qual round. They are planning to close round 1 of applications on March 16th. Louisiana, another state that has already gotten its final proposal approved by NTIA as of November 18th and is in the process of signing contracts with providers and beginning project construction. Maine is still accepting applications and will close its application window on March 7th. Maryland has yet to announce dates, but I expect they'll be publishing something here pretty soon, Q1, Q2 of 2025 to start up applications. Michigan is currently accepting applications and will be closing its application round on April 9th. Minnesota is still accepting pre-qualification materials, which will close on February 27th, and currently has tentative dates for round 1 and round 2, as you see listed here on the slide, starting up in March. Mississippi is going to start up its application round here pretty quickly on February 28th, and that will run until April 14th. And they have dates published as well for round 2 starting in the summer. Missouri has closed its application window as of February 20th and will announce its round 2 dates fairly soon. Next slide, please. Excellent, thank you. Montana, they're no longer accepting applications. They are already in the process of scoring and negotiating with providers and hoping to get a final proposal put together here fairly soon. Nebraska is currently accepting pre-qualification materials and they will close that window on March 9th. And they are currently scheduled to start their round 1 applications running from March 12th to April 11th. Nevada is another state that has already had its final proposal approved by NTIA and is in the process of negotiating and signing contracts with providers and get shovels in the ground to start building out. New Mexico is currently accepting applications and will close its first round on March 3rd. New York has closed its round 1 as of February 7th. They will publish additional information if there are any subsequent rounds after this round 1, but definitely want to stay in touch with their website to see where they're at in that process. North Carolina has not yet announced dates for when it's going to accept applications, but I expect they're going to be putting something out here fairly shortly. North Dakota has already closed its round 1. Round 2, if that is required, is going to be announced for sometime in Q1 or Q2 of 2025. Ohio is currently kind of throwing out some tentative dates for when it plans to hold its pre-qual and round 1 of applications. You can see the dates here, April to May 2025 for the pre-qual and June to August for round 1 of applications. Oklahoma is currently accepting pre-qualification applications and will be accepting materials through April of 2025. They have not yet announced dates for their subgrantee application. Oregon, same thing. They're accepting pre-qualification applications until March 14th, and they have not yet published dates for when they're going to start accepting subgrantee applications. Pennsylvania has already completed one round of applications and will announce its round 2 dates once they have a chance to process and digest the applications they have received. Puerto Rico has yet to announce its dates, but I expect something's going to be coming up here shortly. Excellent. And then Rhode Island, South Dakota, Tennessee, you can see here they've yet to announce their dates, but hoping to get something out here fairly soon as they're definitely running up against the clock. South Carolina has finished its pre-qualification process. They're currently waiting to stand up dates for their application, but I expect something is going to be coming out here fairly soon. Texas has already noted that it's going to start up its pre-qual process in early spring of 2025 with an intent to open up applications in June of 2025. Utah will close its round 1 on April 11th, so they're currently accepting applications. You still have time to apply. Virginia is going to close up its application on March 1st. If required, they will have a round 2 and they will announce those dates. Washington State has already closed its round 1 application and is looking to and is currently scoring and negotiating with providers. They will likely have a round 2 and they will publish those dates soon. They have not done that yet. West Virginia is no longer accepting applications and is in the process of preparing its final proposal, so the window has passed there. Wisconsin is going to close its round 1 today, February 25th, and is going to look to run a round 2 through March 11th. Wyoming like some of these other states here, is no longer accepting applications, is in the process of working with and negotiating with providers to finalize their applications and hoping to get a final proposal ready to go for approval by NTIA. Alex, I think that is it.
It's a lot of great information really quickly, by the way.
Yes.
Fantastic job.
So
So
thank you.
my takeaways here are a couple of things. One, it's extremely important to apply for pre-qualification because that allows you to apply somewhere in either round 1, round 2, or round 3. So again, key thing here, pre-qualification, you don't have to apply at the application phase, but if you miss that pre-qualification window in some of these cases, it doesn't open up again. So if you're in a state that is close to pre-qual, I couldn't urge you more to apply for that. Other takeaway I would say is if you have done your pre-qual and you didn't apply for round 1, round 2, and round 3s are opening up as well. And the strategy around those different rounds are changing too. Some are fiber focused, some are hybrid focused, some are high cost and fixed wireless focused. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we kind of move through. So shifting gears a little bit, Steve, let's put a ball in your court here. What are some of the key policy developments at a state level that service providers should be aware of?
Yeah, well, and again, Alex and Gabriel, thanks. It's really a treat to be able to join you guys here today and wealth of knowledge across the panel. But really, I think it's a very important moment at the state level. We're watching, all 50 states and to some extent the territories as well in their legislative processes. States care now more than ever almost about broadband policy and getting it right and giving providers in many ways the opportunity to do as much with the money as they can in ways that address kind of tax policy and policy around just expanding broadband access and trying, for the most part, to get kind of out of the way. So it takes kind of I think of three sort of buckets of policy approaches that states are looking at right now. One is really good, and that's actually, I'm happy to say, most of the bills that we're tracking right now is in the good column. Some are pretty bad, and some are somewhere in the middle that you're going to want to watch and kind of keep an eye on in your individual state. So let me just say a couple of things about the big trends. The trend that we're most concerned about is what we've seen in New York State and now have consideration or bills starting to come out in California and Massachusetts, and that's a low-cost option requirement. If you have started digging into BEAD, you're probably aware that BEAD requirement has a necessity to offer a low-cost plan to certain folks who qualify based on income and other standards. New York State said that's a great idea, we're going to run with it, and we're going to require that of all service providers across the state. If you offer service in New York, we're going to require you to offer a low-cost option. And that is obviously very challenging and very problematic for our members there in New York. And now California and Massachusetts are looking at considering a similar language to work through the process. We are very much at the table. We've already had conversations with the legislators who are bringing those pieces of legislation about the negative impact it would have on expanding reliable broadband service of any kind throughout the states that are considering those. So we are very much in the fight on having conversations about the negative impact that those could have. But thankfully, minimal interest so far. 2 out of the 50 states is okay. Obviously, California is a lot of impact, but we're going to work to minimize that, continue to educate legislators in advance of considering these kinds of legislation so that instead of playing defense, it stays off the court. The good piece, though, to kind of shift our focus a little bit, is how states treat tax implications for a couple of major buckets that you might be interested in. One of those, in most states that we have members, if you receive a state or a federal broadband grant, that gets treated as taxable income for the company, and you have to report that if you're not depreciating it appropriately. Well, most states or several states are starting to look at that and say that's just not a great way. We shouldn't be putting taxpayer money into a bucket with one hand and taking it back out with the other. So let's make sure that that is not treated as taxable income for the companies so that you can put that infrastructure into the ground as far as possible and not have to worry about paying back in taxes some portion of that grant you've received. The bigger consideration and the bigger push across about a dozen states nationally is a treatment of sales tax for broadband-related equipment. If you're buying fiber, if you're buying radio equipment, if you're buying anything else related to expanding your broadband network, states are saying you should not be paying sales tax for those purchases, so that you can buy a little bit more fiber, a little bit more radio equipment, a little bit more of the infrastructure that you need to deploy your network, and make sure that money goes into the ground in expanded investment in broadband service, rather than coming back to the state in some other form. So we really appreciate that. We are pushing very heavily across all of our states that are considering that sort of legislation to make sure that we get those bills across the finish line. There's a real appetite for states to view it not as a loss of revenue for other projects, but as a really wise investment in broadband expansion in a way that really is going to benefit the state. And we really love to see that. So we're continuing to push that. And then there's kind of the potpourri of other issues. Minnesota made some mistakes in increasing their certification and licensing requirements for broadband installers. They're looking at now peeling some of that back. So actually, as soon as I get off of this call, I'm going to be driving up to St. Paul to talk to some legislators about the beneficial impacts of making sure that you don't have too much regulation on the labor side for broadband projects or for anything else. There are some infrastructure access kind of bills floating around out there, maybe increasing fixed wireless access to vertical infrastructure and other things. And then kind of some onesie-twosie issues in reorganization broadband offices and some other things. But those are kind of the major drivers, is states looking at this opportunity now to fund and really make meaningful investments in their broadband deployment opportunities, and looking at how they can best do that to kind of get out of the way and let providers really run with the ball.
Excellent, excellent. Now, on that same vein, how are these different states interpreting the BEAD program's requirements? And do you see any challenges in securing funding for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. And I mean, I think Gabriel's really thoughtful overview of the state of play across all 50 states kind of goes to that notion that I think everybody here is a little bit familiar with. Every state scores their projects a little bit differently. Every state, puts a little bit of a different emphasis on a different facet of the BEAD program. And so you really want to get to know your states and get to understand what they specifically are looking for. But many of them are going to be very concerned with the overall use of BEAD funds. How much money are you asking for, and how much can you do with that money that you are getting? And the other thing that people are looking for is time to deployment and getting out there and really building those networks. So that's where a fixed wireless provider might really want to start thinking about, hey, can I pick up 2, 3, 5 points in an application? But the other thing that I really want to highlight is states getting really concerned about the money that they have and how far that money is going to go. And they are looking for ways to pull locations off the map of where they have to serve and take them to the side so that they don't have to spend money. And I want to highlight something that Wisconsin is doing, that WISPA is having conversations now across the country to encourage other states to do a similar thing. We have that alternative technology guidance that NTIA issued at the end of last year, saying we want to find some ways in areas that receive no bids or are challenging to serve to increase the amount of coverage there, and to treat unlicensed fixed wireless as servicing those areas where we have no other applications for projects. And so Wisconsin is getting out ahead of that. They're kind of taking that ball and running with it and saying, if you are a fixed wireless provider who offers 100 by 20 unlicensed fixed wireless service in qualifying areas, please tell us that right up front, right now, because we don't think our money is going to last far enough to get all of our locations served. And we want to take your networks off the map so that we don't have to worry about applications coming in for those areas. We can consider them served, and we can move on with our lives for the areas that really truly need it. So states using that guidance, using that alternative technology approach to say, how can we reach out right now before we're going through round 2 of our grants, before we're finalizing our scores, before we're finalizing the submission to NTIA, how can we use those fixed wireless networks to say, all right, those locations are served, and now we want to really focus on our true problem areas. That's a great approach, and we want to see other states taking it. But it's great to see Wisconsin kind of getting out ahead of that ball. And as I think about that, and as I think about all the things that states are doing, I think that it's very exciting to see kind of what's going on with states looking for those flexibilities.
Yeah,
So,
and real credit, hats off to WISPA for really taking that message to state broadband offices and helping them understand, this is a once in a generation investment, and we need to make the most of this historic investment in our broadband infrastructure. I think for most folks on this, I hope most folks on this call are familiar with WISPA and the excellent work that WISPA does for its members and service providers more broadly across the nation to continue to do the great work that they do to deliver reliable high-speed broadband access to folks and communities. But Steve, I'd love for you to tell the folks on the call just a little bit more about the role that WISPA plays in advocating for these fair and common sense policies that support WISPs and other broadband providers, particularly in the context of the BEAD process.
yeah, no, absolutely, and thanks for that. And this is, I think sometimes a small but mighty team that's at the table where conversations are happening and decisions are being made. So at our staff level, we have a strong team that focuses on federal policy, whether that's engagement with the FCC, NTIA, any of those 3-4 letter agencies that are governing broadband policy broadly, and certainly spectrum access and other things that our members are interested in. We are there defending access to spectrum, defending our members' interests, and having those conversations every day. We're also on Capitol Hill every day, talking to legislators about, right now the Farm Bill is going through, other policy considerations are going through. There's some consideration of tax treatment of BEAD funds at the federal level as well, to get those not only off your state income taxes, but off your federal income taxes. We're in those conversations and we're pushing legislation. And our goal is to do the same thing at the state level. I watch all 50 states. We stay engaged through our staff, as well as through our volunteer coordinators who are WISPA members who are stepping in to stay engaged. We want to make sure that we're at every table where conversations are happening on decisions that can affect our members, to defend those interests and to really stay leaning forward on conversations and shaping policy as it goes forward.
No, and thank you again for all the great work you're doing on all of our behalfs. Gabriel, just changing gears for a second, you did a fantastic job providing a high-level overview of what states are doing what next. My question to you are, what's the latest updates regarding BEAD funding? And are there any notable changes from the NTIA that service providers really should pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, that is the $42.45 billion question on all of our minds right now, especially as, with the change in administration and kind of the flurry of executive orders that colored the first couple of weeks of the Trump administration. A lot of providers and state broadband offices have questions about what's going to happen with the BEAD program. The kind of common sense advice I would give ISPs on this call, or speed stakeholders, is there's a lot of noise right now in the industry and trade press as to what potentially is going to happen to the BEAD program. I think it's really important to look directly at the look at the constraints and kind of identify who needs to get put in place in order for changes to actually happen with the BEAD program. So for folks on this call, the NTIA within the Department of Commerce that oversees the BEAD program just recently had its new Secretary Howard Lutnick, confirmed this last week, which paves the way for critical nominations like the head of the NTIA, who is presumably going to be Ariel Roth, to be put into place, and also to start staffing up the NTIA to kind of get folks who are kind of in alignment or team players with the Trump administration to enact changes to the BEAD program. And looking at the public record, looking at what Ariel Roth has said about the BEAD program, looking at what Secretary Lutnick has said about the BEAD program, gives us a pretty good sense that I think what most states and providers can expect is changes to the BEAD program that kind of loosen the fiber preference that was initially articulated by the NTIA under the Biden administration, and a greater level playing field for innovative technologies, particularly unlicensed fixed wireless and potentially low Earth orbit as well, to really help stretch these BEAD dollars as far as possible and to reach more families and communities with great, reliable, high-speed broadband infrastructure. I think that another thing to really also keep, with that in mind, states are expecting and anticipating a pause in BEAD funding that will give them time to potentially reorient their programs around new federal guidance from NTIA, and give them more time to re-engage with ISPs who potentially felt like the BEAD program under the prior administration was exclusionary for their participation. Another thing that I think is interesting is, definitely near the transition period between the Biden and Trump administrations, we definitely saw a lot of states rush to try and get their final proposals approved and kind of get applications in place and kind of have something that could be approved by the Biden administration, then hopefully paid out under the Trump administration. My understanding is that it has not been that simple. Even though there are states that we highlighted here today, like Louisiana or Nevada or Delaware, that have already turned in their final proposal, have already gotten NTIA approval, they're still waiting for the funding to actually come down from the federal government. And in part, that's because there are certain compliance and organizational entities like NIST within the Department of Commerce that really oversee the disbursement of funds as part of the BEAD program. So, in terms of behind the scenes, state broadband offices are eager to get the funding and get shovels in the ground and get broadband out into communities, but currently there are some holds on the funding that are preventing those checks from being written and those dollars going out to providers. So certainly a lot of moving pieces, and I think we're going to, especially as we head into kind of mid-March, I think we're going to see a lot more movement and a lot clearer direction as to what the new NTIA holds for the BEAD program.
Excellent.
Yeah, of course. And one thing to really highlight, I think, is that Alex, you and the great folks at Winncom have really done a really good job of helping guide ISPs who are bidding, whether they're bidding fiber or they're bidding wireless, really giving them good direction as to how to navigate the diverse, multi-state BEAD nuances and challenges and efforts in the application windows. What are some common funding pitfalls that I think that you think applicants should be mindful of and should look to avoid as they prepare to submit their applications?
No, I think that's a fantastic question. 4 things really come to mind. First and foremost, it's delaying the engagement process. And I can't stress this enough, but if you're considering for applying for BEAD funding, don't wait. Start preparing now. If you think you're about getting involved, commit to the process. His timing is absolutely critical. Each step in this process takes time. Most states require audited financials of either 1 or 3 years. Pre-engineering also takes time to identify potential project areas or broadband serviceable locations. And as we'll talk about, you need to have a strategy for each one of those service areas, BSLs, along with the corresponding community anchor locations. And then the other piece of that pie is grant writing. Grant writing to put together the narratives. You're talking 60 days to put this all together. So the biggest pitfall, again, is that timing aspect and making sure you have at least enough, and at least to me would be 60, 90 days to put all these pieces of the pie together. The other pitfall I see is not preparing for the letter of credit or the LOC. So each BEAD applicant, they've got to put together a letter of credit from a qualified financial institution. And that's essentially 25% of the total grant amount. Now, the requirement is there to help showcase financial stability and project commitment. And eligible institutions range from, it could be the bank you're doing business with, it could be a credit union, or it could be a performance bond. And we can help point you in directions if performance bond is of interest. We've got some association relationships. Ignoring stakeholder engagement is probably the third pitfall we see. So strong community support, strong community engagement is essential to have for that successful application. So again, I recommend that applicants should collaborate with local governments, with community organizations, and to demonstrate that broad support, which will help in that application submission. The fourth one I would say is just, and this is the unfortunate aspect of there's information all over the place, it's a lack of understanding of the program requirements. BEAD funding has strict eligibility requirements, including financials, technicals, regulatory obligations. So applicants really need to be careful when they're submitting these applications, because we have seen in a couple instances where that lack of understanding created a failure to be accepted. Now, what I can say, and Gabriel kind of teed me up here, is Winncom has programs here to help. So we can help you identify from a pre-engineering perspective, be it fixed wireless, be it fiber, be it hybrid, what are the right project areas and BSLs and community anchor locations you should target from your existing locations. If you've got a fiber spine or if you've got tower asset locations, we can help you put together that strategy. And a key thing we'll talk about as this time progresses, once you choose a project area, you need to have a technology plan for every BSL, broadband serviceable location, or community anchor location in there, be it hybrid, be it fiber, be it fixed wireless, or in some circumstances, in extreme high cost areas, people are using satellite. But again, we can help you create that strategy. With our in-house program, we can offer a multitude of different grant writing options. So we can either offer an audit service if this is something you've done. For example, if you've already submitted through RDOF or capital projects and you have your audited financials and you've got your business and budget narratives, it's a real simple process to help you audit that and submit on the BEAD behalf. We've got a middle of the ground process where if you need a little bit of help, we can fill in some more blanks. And then we've got the ability to turnkey that entire experience. We'll have the ability to do PE stamp drawings. If you're talking about fiber networks, we can do high level and low level designs. And then if you are a fixed wireless provider who wants to look for a consortium option or you need help with installation, we've got a group of partners that we can certainly refer you to help you with that turnkey experience. But our goal here at Winncom is to make this a simple journey for you, to give you one central point of contact. And to that one point of contact, there's a group of people behind them, all here to enable your success. So Gabriel, kind of with that said, I'm going to put the ball back in your court. And how can service providers, how can they best position themselves to be competitive in the BEAD funding process?
Yeah, well, one thing I will just kind of echo that you said is working with a consultant, working with a grant writer, working with professional engineers. That just really, frankly, for a program like BEAD that has so many nuances, state by state, I think just kind of having the experts, behind you to back up your application just makes your likelihood of success that much higher. And the folks at Winncom have really aggregated some great services to help ISPs. But from a practical deployment perspective, one thing that Tarana has really been advising ISPs about how to be competitive in the BEAD process is by submitting applications that utilize a mixture of technologies. So to the extent your state rules permit or allow, running a certain amount of your network as fiber. And then for those locations that are most high cost or most hard to reach or hard to deploy fiber, that's where you step in and you deploy a next generation fixed wireless solution like ours. In a perfect world, we've told ISPs, if you have the ability to, if you have the time and the money, ideally you would be submitting 3 applications for a given project area. One application that is just all fiber, just to show the market cost to the state broadband office of, hey, this is the real cost of deploying fiber and setting up infrastructure, to serve all of the unserved and underserved BSLs in a project area. A second application that is entirely reliable fixed wireless solution. So just kind of showing your ability to reach out and serve a high number of unserved and underserved BSLs at significantly lower cost than the fiber application. And then finally, a Goldilocks application that is kind of that appropriate mixture of fiber and next generation fixed wireless. And really what's important to kind of signal to the state broadband office is, one, you yourself are open and able to adjust your project application, and you're able to use a multiplicity of technologies to get the job done. The majority of fixed wireless awards that we have seen, particularly for providers that have bid our technology in states like Nevada and Louisiana, have occurred at the negotiating table, where the state broadband office is engaging directly with the ISP and saying, hey, look, we love this part of your application, but the cost to serve these areas is a bit too high. How can you bring the dollar cost per broadband serviceable location down into a manageable level while also still delivering great, reliable, high-speed broadband service that not just meets but exceeds the BEAD's programmatic requirements for broadband service? So that's really been something that that's definitely been something that we've advised to our ISPs, and we've seen a lot of success with. State broadband offices are at the end of the day trying to balance that math equation of their finite BEAD allocation and the number of unserved and underserved BSLs. And being an ISP that is able to offer up hybrid technology solutions is a huge asset for those state broadband offices that are trying to reach the goal that we all agree to of 100% universal service.
I think that's perfectly said. I find myself using an analogy of a toolbox. So toolbox contains different tools. So based on your application type, if it's urban areas, it could be fiber with higher density. If it's suburban areas, it could be a hybrid type of approach. Rural areas, fixed wireless, be it CBRS or 6 gig or sub 6 gig. So again, using the right tool in the toolbox to enable the best project cost for your application. And again, collectively here as a team, that's something we can help you with. So Steve, from a technology consideration for these broadband deployments, BEAD isn't just about fiber. How should service providers determine the right technology mix for their project area?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, Alex, with that tool in the toolbox analogy, you're speaking WISPA's language. This is the message that we take to every single broadband office. I think there are several of them that are really sick of me hearing me say it. Is what's the right tool for the job, right? And what is the right technology? What is the right application? And what's the right dollar amount for a given location? So I think first of all, I love the talk of fiber, but sometimes my eye twitches a little bit, and I want to put on my WISPA wireless internet service provider's hat for just a second and say, first of all, don't be afraid to look at your unlicensed fixed wireless options and really show the state what that option can do. Every state has the authority and the power solely to determine what their extremely high cost per location threshold is and what that number does to determine what locations are open to unlicensed fixed wireless, or kind of that current category of alternative technologies. WISPA is doing a lot of work still to get rid of that definition and open that reliable broadband definition to all technologies. But even in the case that that doesn't change, right now every state is thinking about how to use that high cost threshold to use their money to go as far as they possibly can to close the digital divide. So put forward your application for unlicensed fixed wireless. Put forward your best number so that the state can understand this is the true difference between a fiber project in this location and any kind of range of alternative technologies, whether it's licensed or unlicensed spectrum fixed wireless, or that hybrid network that might find a really nice home depending on the location and the neighborhood that you're looking at. So don't shy away from any of your options, because the way the state gets their information is from the applications that our members put in. So the more information we can give them about true costs, true timelines, true overall investment considerations, we're really going to benefit the entire kind of network from giving those outlooks. The other thing that I really want people to think about is that consortium model. So we have several states that have specifically built in kind of a preference for a consortium in BEAD. Other states just kind of look at the individual projects, but partnerships like that can really pay some dividends. We just got back from our state lobby day in Texas, where we brought our members to the state capitol in Austin, and we had a fiber provider show up because he said, look, we're not a WISPA member yet, we're in talks, but we're interested in finding fixed wireless partners because we have a lot of middle mile fiber running through parts of Texas in rural areas where we are not going to be able to see a profit motive for our network to build out to the communities that are kind of off of that middle mile network. But we think a fixed wireless partner would be a really great fit for that, and we'd be interested in exploring options. You may have a neighbor, you may have somebody down the street who has a fiber network that you could partner with to really expand into areas that serve both of you in some way. And thinking about those creative solutions to approaching an area that you might be interested in either defense or offense in expanding your BEAD application, but think about those partnership opportunities and think about how they might serve you. And I really want to just kind of comment. Gabriel has been pretty deeply engaged in this as well, and looking at state broadband plans, BEAD plans. Gabriel, you've seen some lessons that maybe would be good for our members as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Steve, to your point, playing to your strengths as an ISP is a really important way to, I think, put yourself forward, and not trying to be something that you aren't, I think is important in the context of the BEAD program, because state broadband offices, I think they're pretty mindful of the relative capacities, technical and financial, of ISPs. And if you are traditionally a wireless internet service provider and you're proposing applications that are all fiber and you don't have a track record of doing fiber, that is potentially an uphill battle when you're engaging with the state broadband office. So being able to partner with another community-based, local, based in the state fiber operator is a great way to kind of augment your application and make yourself stronger. I think the other thing that's definitely important to think about is as you bring in non-fiber technologies into your application, there are scoring categories that definitely benefit you if you're able to offer higher speeds that exceed that 100 by 20 megabit per second, less than 100 milliseconds of latency threshold that the NTIA has set. And obviously, if you read the BEAD NOFO, the number of times that the word or the phrase future-proof and scalable gets used in the context of broadband infrastructure is alarmingly high. So I think that when you're putting forward an application, you want to propose, especially if you're not proposing all fiber, you want to offer up fixed wireless solutions or non-fiber solutions that are above that 100 by 20 megabit per second threshold. We have some ISPs who I know are going to be approaching their BEAD applications where they're not going to offer any non-fiber service that's less than 100 by 100 megabit per second symmetrical. So kind of raising the standard for the state broadband office. And I think that makes the decision-making process for the state broadband offices much easier when they can say, hey, this isn't somebody who's going to be putting forward a solution that's going to last, let's say 2 years before it needs to get swapped out for something else that can support higher speeds. This is something that'll be be a generational investment that'll last, benefit multiple families, multiple businesses over time. And again, it's all about making the most of this once-in-a-generation investment.
I think that's a perfect way to segment into product. So from a Tarana perspective, what role does fixed wireless technology play in that broadband gap, in particular in rural and underserved areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that traditionally fixed wireless technology really has been key in connecting up our rural communities and historically and traditionally unserved and underserved folks. And as the BEAD program comes through and starts to put in more investment into some of these communities that are kind of farther or harder to serve, or it's much harder for a larger entity to make a business case to serve these folks with fiber traditionally, next generation fixed wireless in particular has really stepped in at a really great time. First, one thing I'll highlight is, with our traditional next generation fixed wireless service, if you're operating in the 3 gigahertz or CBRS spectrum, whether it is GAA or if you have a PAL, it is considered reliable broadband service under the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity. So we've had ISPs that have deployed our technology as part of the challenge process before BEAD dollars have been awarded as a defensive strategy to ensure that their commitment and investment to a given community or neighborhood or neighborhoods is respected, is by deploying this technology and being able to cover hundreds, if not thousands of homes, and ensuring that you're not going to have taxpayer-funded overbuild of their networks. So that's been one really big way in where we've seen operators adopt our technology. The other key thing, which I've alluded to, is of course that we've got operators who have won BEAD dollars in both Louisiana and Nevada using our CBRS technology. And Alex, if you don't mind toggling over to the next slide here, because hey, I'm a guy who reads the BEAD NOFO. I gotta bust out the language when I can. the NTIA was really, hats off to WISPA for really pushing for this clarity from NTIA about the status of CBRS technologies, because kind of in the shuffle of trying to get BEAD documents out the door and then the FCC updating its BDC code classifications, there was a little bit of ambiguity as to whether CBRS was considered reliable. The BEAD NOFO FAQ version 5 has spelled this out very clearly for state broadband offices and for operators that yes, you can deploy CBRS technologies, again, whether if it's in GAA or if it's in PAL, it is considered reliable for the purposes of the BEAD program. So, as folks are, integrating Tarana into their network, they can be assured that they're integrating technology that is BEAD eligible and future proof and is not going to be overbuilt by another taxpayer funded program, or at least not by BEAD. And the other thing I'll just say as well is, this is the perfect complement for a fiber application. This is something where, again, we've had operators who've put in our Tarana equipment, and they're not using the Tarana equipment to offer just 100 by 20 megabit per second service. They're offering hundreds of megabits over the federal standard. And so, that's a really key differentiator for them as they approach state broadband offices and are up for consideration to be awarded.
And just to add on just really quickly, Winncom can help in two additional ways here. One's from a product eco center. So we maintain a list of vendors that are either certified, and that would be on active or passive fiber, and those who are exempt, like the Tarana Wireless and Middle Mile Technologies, or infrastructure with DOC de minimis. So one of the things we can help you with is putting together that complete and compliant bill of materials. The second aspect is from a compliancy perspective. We work with each one of our manufacturers on these opportunities, and we can provide you with those compliancy documentations. That way, as you're submitting the applications, you've got absolutely everything you need at the forefront.
And just to reiterate, that just saves you so much time. Again, time is of the essence when you're trying to get a BEAD application in. This isn't something that you can just hammer out over a weekend with, a 6-pack of Red Bulls. It's, this takes real time and thought and
Yep.
Consideration.
I'd like to add, kind of from the WISPA perspective, I'm jumping in where I haven't before, but I do think, a lot of especially our very small provider members who say, I don't have the staff time, I'd like to participate in BEAD, I'd like to be there in some way, but I don't feel like I have the staff time because maybe I only have 2 or 3 people in the office every day. These are the kinds of partnerships that you should be thinking about. Is, do you have, a supplier provider who might offer grant writing services as well? Are there other partners out there in the ecosystem, in the industry, that are offering services that can kind of bolster or supplement the talent that you have internally to your office? And think about how you can use those partnerships as well to really, build a successful application. I think resources are out there, and conversations like this really highlight. There are people who are interested and invested in your success, and look for those if you're interested in finding those partnerships.
Excellent, excellent. So Gabriel, quick question for you. How should service providers approach network scalability and future-proofing when using BEAD funds?
Yeah, absolutely. And, just kind of to, rehash kind of some of the points I've made, when you're deploying a non-fiber technology, you have to demonstrate to the state broadband office that you're not just meeting the federal standards, you're exceeding them greatly. And that just gives them deeper assurance that you're deploying a technology that will scale with, projected consumer or home or business needs. And it just makes the case a lot easier for them to award non-fiber technologies. And I think that certainly in my communication with ISPs that have already won BEAD dollars utilizing our technology, that was a key differentiator as they entered the negotiation process with state broadband offices on getting an application that wasn't like punitive, so expensive and just all fiber, but was an appropriate, healthy balance that worked for the state broadband office, worked for the ISP, and is going to serve and deliver for those homes and businesses that are going to get this service. So I think that's been really, really crucial.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
So shifting gears really quick, so move into the deployment challenges and best practices section. Steve, from WISPA's perspective, what are some of the biggest deployment challenges service providers face with BEAD funded projects, and how can they overcome them?
Yeah, well, we've talked about, I think some of the biggest challenges a little bit already. The letter of credit obviously is big. The audited financials is a huge challenge for a lot of our members. But look for your state-specific plans, because several states, because of WISPA conversations that kind of explain the challenges of these things, have said, we're going to allow you to build in the cost of your audited financials into your BEAD application, and use that funding then to actually pay for on the back end your audited financials once you win an award provisionally. So some states are really looking for ways to give our members tools to really be able to engage with those aspects that are most challenging to them. Other states, because of WISPA conversations, have said, look, we are going to really robustly use those letter of credit alternatives, because now we understand where we haven't before that performance bonds are actually really much more accessible to some ISPs that may not be able to get that letter of credit. So we're going to look for those opportunities, and that's where WISPA conversations really have kind of shaped the playing field. But look to your state-specific plan. I think the next set of challenges can be around labor, certainly. The BEAD requirements are tending to favor, unionized labor or kind of some kind of labor plan, and also in permitting. And especially with permitting, some of those permits go down all the way to your local community level, and your next town over where you want to serve may or may not have a great permitting structure that allows it to move quickly and cost effectively through getting that permit approved. WISPA has really helped states understand a model that's called broadband ready communities. There are some good memos out there and materials online, but we've helped broadband offices understand that they can roll out a model that provides a really model pathway for communities to approve permitting in a timely and cost-effective fashion, to make sure that they have the robust tools that are available to the communities to help understand the need and the urgency of this program. So we're making sure that we try to help educate our states on ways to address these challenges, but you should also be looking for your partnerships with your communities. Again, that letter of support or a signal of engagement from the communities that you want to serve with BEAD is going to be really vital. Start building those connections now. Start using your current service base to kind of build into creating partnerships and understandings and relationships with the communities that you want to serve, because those are going to be very important. Alex, I know you've had some thoughts about audited financials as well, and how states are looking at that. Can you kind of speak to those audited financials a little bit?
I think you said it very well. Each state's a little bit different. And I've had a couple conversations with customers where they didn't have audited financials. And again, it varies per state. Some are 1 year audited, some are 3. And as you said, Steve, some of them, you just need to make a pledge that you'll do that. And then you could tie that into the grant request. And then you do your audited financials before the money is allocated. So every state's a little bit different. And what I would highly encourage, just engage us. We've got our ear to the proverbial ground here. So between Steve, between Gabriel, between ourselves, we're in constant contact with state organizers. So we will have the most updated versions of what you need for these applications and how we can best assist you with them. So I know we're running short on time here. And again, I thank everyone for sticking with us. I'll just pose one last question to the group. What are the key takeaways service providers should focus on as they prepare for their next step in the BEAD program?
I think if there's one thing that I would really recommend, it's really engage with your state broadband office and have a relationship with the folks at the state broadband office, not just the director or the state broadband officer, but the staff level relationships. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, they benefit from your success, and having they want to have a competitive application process where they are able to make the best decisions for their state, for the providers who are participating. And so I think that if you're able to approach them, have that working relationship with them, it will benefit you, particularly as you submit applications, as you have questions about how to navigate some of those challenging, thorny issues like permitting or some of the pre-qual requirements. And then ultimately, it will benefit you in the negotiating phase. The majority of the key BEAD decisions don't happen just in the kind of the scoring phase where they're stacking up applications against each other. It is when the state broadband office comes to you as the service provider provider pulls out your application and starts working with you to figure out how they can award you money and also have a cost-effective application that delivers, reliable high-speed broadband service. So I think if that's one thing I could impart on folks here today is send that email to that state broadband office, show up at that town hall, show up to that listening session, be a familiar face for the state broadband office.
Yeah, I really just want to emphasize, more than ever, states right now, especially as we go into a new administration, are thinking really carefully about the kinds of flexibilities that they individually might need to be able to implement a really successful BEAD program that meets all the requirements and meets their own goals. And you are the vehicle toward communicating what the industry needs to be able to succeed in that. I was just having a conversation with a couple of our Florida members, and they said, look, we talk to our state broadband office every day to the point that they say, look, we're sick of hearing about technology neutrality. We know, and we want to do it. But states are actively searching for ways to request those flexibilities and then to implement those flexibilities. And it's a moment where we've got some real opportunity to kind of reshape and continue to shape the groundwork that we're going to be building on in the next year. So stay engaged, stay in your ears of your broadband offices at every level, and continue to have those conversations. We're here as well, so flag those issues to WISPA, to the folks on this call, so that they can continue to watch for those as well. But just stay engaged. Every state has BEAD webinars going on. Watch those, have the conversations. They're there for you, and they want to hear from you.
And I say the last comment I have on my end, a two-part conversation real quick, is I want to reiterate timing. There's a lot of moving pieces in here, just from a pre-engineering perspective to identifying project areas and how do you leverage the right technology to service those BSLs, to getting that letter of credit, either a performance bond, is it coming from your bank, then moving over to grant writing, putting together those narratives, pulling those financials if they're required. If it's a fiber build, you then have to get pre-engineering, PE stamp drawings, high-level designs, bill of materials, submissions, all that's wrapped into these narratives. So again, a ton of moving pieces. And the good part here is you've got a team of people who are really good at doing this behind it. So reach out to us, engage us early, and we can help you walk through this entire process. Again, for those who have taken the time, thank you so much. Please don't hesitate. We're here to help in any way possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Thanks, folks.
All right. Thanks, all.
Thank you, guys. Gabriel, Steve, thank you.
Yeah, no. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Don.